Freedom has never belonged to the majority. Small, disciplined operators outperform large systems. Our brand of financial advocacy, mine and Karen's on this side of the table, and craft distilleries with Willie's Distillery are a part of the new frontier where that truth still applies. So by the end of the show, we'll have a clear understanding of what that means.
Welcome to Montana Whiskey, Wealth, and Freedom.
Well, I'm betting in love. I've been on the ground, but gotten back on my feet. Just fall back down on my knees for you and your whiskey under the bridge.
Welcome to the Whiskey, Wealth, and Freedom Show. I'm going to do the title of the show. Willie, I have to refer back to the show that you did with us back in January, the Million Acre Bourbon Show. Do you recall, did you get a chance to watch that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What'd you think?
I liked it. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was, I think both that one and the one we did with the Moonshine Show back in October, I think, were two of our better shows. So it must be something to do with the guests. But
Yeah.
But anyway, so in that conversation, you had made the comment, it was really funny, about the different barrel sizes that you use as
Right.
part of your distilling process, and you had made the comment that size does matter.
All right.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
So what's just funny, so that I titled this show "Small Units, Big Impact."
Nice.
Yeah, so it's kind of staying with the same size matters theme, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the opening claim for the show is freedom has never belonged to the majority. Small, disciplined operators outperform large systems. Our brand of financial advocacy, mine and Karen's on this side of the table, and craft distilleries with Willie's Distillery are a part of the new frontier where that truth still applies. So by the end of the show, we'll have a clear understanding of what that means. So that's kind of the opening claim of the show, and then we're going to have a conversation that's going to basically bring some clarity to the claim. So with that said, quick intros. Returners, we've got Willie Blazer, founder and CEO of Willie's Distillery. Willie, thank you for coming back again.
Thanks for having me.
Very much appreciated. And Karen Goff, certified liability advisor and mortgage professional with CMG Home Loans. You're stuck coming every show, so you don't have a choice. Our newcomer today is Michael Manley. And Michael, I took the liberty of putting some notes together about you based on what I found from the Butte Network. The business network description when you were spotlighted there. So I have you listed as an entrepreneur and a business owner with Odyssey Computer Repair, and you are also a homestead farmer. Is that accurate?
That's pretty accurate.
Okay. And then you had mentioned there vice was whiskey sours. Is that still, would you still consider that a vice of yours?
I'm not sure it's really a vice. It's definitely something that I love.
Yeah.
So do you feel comfortable divulging or sharing what whiskey you like to use?
I like to try a lot of whiskeys. I think with the micro distilleries, it's opened up a whole new opportunity, and I love it. So every chance I get, I'm trying new whiskeys. I haven't landed on one yet that is the go-to every time.
Well, hopefully by the end of the
cool.
show today, we will have exposed you to a few top-notch ones that you might put on the short list for those sours.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I did also, you had a quote, you had the most famous or infamous, I guess famous quote from Theodore Roosevelt about, we all know this quote. And I just pulled pieces out of it. This isn't the whole quote, but the credit belongs to the man in the arena who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I included that into the intro for you just because it's so relevant to the conversation we're going to have today around the Devil's Brigade whiskey and everything else that's going to be folded into the show. Small units, big impact. So, yeah. So,
Sounds great.
Anything else you'd like to add to your introduction since you're the newbie today?
I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for coming in. And Willie, just for your benefit, Michael was somebody that we thought would be great to do the show with. We don't know Michael that well, but you know, and I'm sure you've experienced this when you find people who seem to have a little bit more keen sense of understanding of kind of the world that we live in and how systems work, and you know, so sort of the reality of the world. There is because those people are a little on the rare side. I thought it would be nice to have him come in and share this conversation with us, and I would think it's fair to say it's an interest of yours too, right?
Oh, it's a passion. Yeah, we've structured our entire lives around freedom, entrepreneurship, and trying to revive some of the values our forefathers had that I think are largely lost today.
Very good. Well,
your last name's Manley. You by chance related to any of the Manleys over in Ennis or the Madison Valley?
I've been asked that question before, and it might be a distant relation, but not that I know of.
Yeah.
So most of the people I could ask that question to are no longer around.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is because the Manleys were moonshiners in Madison Valley.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And we've got one of their original stills on display in our tasting room, the Manley still.
Cool.
I have
pretty
enjoyed
neat.
looking at that still and wondering.
well,
You can always claim.
let's say let's just because we don't know, right? So
We don't know.
So we could say, yeah, you are.
Well, I can say with certainty that the Manleys I'm related to were also moonshiners. I just don't know if they were the same Manleys.
Yeah, that's cool. It's cool though.
Yeah.
So
So I have one more request. Now that we've got the sound right, will you please, Michael, grab that that tin tack behind you, behind Willie's head, the one with the and then pull it into the corner. Yep, right there. Want to make sure we can see that because that's
Super
really
cool.
cool. Yeah. All right.
Or we can move.
Swap it out.
Swap
Do you
it.
want it swapped?
Yeah. Swap the one behind Willie, please. Yeah. Put you guys to work.
Right there.
Yeah, and then this one like here, right?
There we go.
Yeah.
I think that'll work.
How does that?
Maybe a little bit more closer to you, Willie. Put you guys to work today.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. We just have to show that off because, Willie, it was kind of you to bring that in to share with everybody. That is something that is available for purchase at williesdistillery.com. And if they use the code TREASURE, they get 15% off that tin tacker, plus any of the other merchandise there. But let's talk about the Devil's Brigade whiskey, right? I mean, I'm right calling it a whiskey.
Yeah, it is. It is a whiskey.
Okay. All right. So, and there's a lot. It's interesting because while all of your labeling on the products that we've done with you so far have been great, this one just seems a little bit different. This one has a little bit more story to it that that's definitely worth getting into and talking about. But so the Devil's Brigade whiskey. I want to kind of just let you share what is story-wise. What is the thing about the Devil's Brigade whiskey that people should know?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think that it's kind of part of my story a little bit with Montana and being in the military and specifically Special Forces. The Devil's Brigade unit was basically the original commandos, World War II. And all of our Special Forces units today, both on the American side and the Canadian side, take their lineage from the 1st Special Service Force, which is what they were called And then they got nicknamed the Devil's Brigade, and we can go into that. They're named the Black Devils. That's what the Nazis referred to them. But they were formed in 1942 in Helena, Montana, Fort Harrison.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was a very, very secretive unit. They trucked those guys in that they recruited, in boxcars and stuff like that. Very secretive unit. But they're originally formed in 1942 to fight the Nazis in Norway. So it was all about winter warfare. So they did all their training, and they were some of the first paratroopers also. But they were commandos, and they fought with their hands and very good with knives and all their weapon systems, and just some pretty hardcore guys. And they were older. They weren't like 18-year-olds. I mean, I'm sure there were a few, but they basically recruited loggers and miners and game wardens, and I'm sure there were a few hooligans and brigands in there. As you mentioned, the movie, I think it was 1969, but a pretty classic, awesome movie. But it's kind of a story to my background, and I'm in the Montana Special Forces Association. It's Chapter 28, and it's called the Devil's Brigade Chapter. And some of those guys had reached out to me over the years. It was like, hey, Willie, you should do something in honor of the Devil's Brigade, the 1st Special Service Force. And kind of put it on the back burner for a while, but a few of the guys kept talking to me, and I was like, you know what, that's a good idea, and I just want to do it right. Like, I don't want to, take credit for their name. Got to tell the story, and I got the blessing from the Special Forces Association and the 1st Special Service Force Association, and they're like, oh yeah, by all means, do it, tell the story, keep the story alive. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Devil's Brigade story from?
Not nearly as much as I'm learning new stuff today, but yes, I am familiar with them.
Yeah. It's I thought it was interesting, Willie, just to expand a little bit on what you mentioned already. The brigade was comprised of, just what an interesting mix of people: backcountry rangers, soldiers, lumberjacks, north woodsmen, hunters, prospectors, explorers, game wardens, and mountain men, who volunteered to join the secretive unit in 1942, as you mentioned. And crazy, they were only in service for 2 years.
Yeah, just about
disbanded in
just
44.
about two years. Yeah, they'd gotten used up, like you're talking about, but a very, very small unit, small numbers.
Yeah,
very good fighting force. They had some of the highest casualties in World War II, but they also inflicted some of the highest casualties, to the Germans, Nazis.
Wow.
But it was a joint unit. It was joint Canadian and American. So it was about 60% American and then about 40% Canadians. And that's where we got our blend from. It's 60% bourbon, which is an American whiskey, our bourbon. And then we use 40% Canadian whiskey from a distillery we work with in Alberta.
Nice.
So it's got that blend, and it's 42% alcohol, which is a take on the V40, the V42 knife.
So yeah, tell us about
42%
that.
alcohol.
yeah. Which we have one right here, like leaning up against the bottle here in the front.
Yeah, Colonel Frederick ended up becoming General Frederick, but he started up the unit, and this was his knife that he designed. And it's a stiletto, V42 stiletto knife, but it's got a little skull crusher. It can go through helmets or skulls. But they were commandos, and they were some of the first guys that started wearing, like camouflage. They'd use like black shoe polish on their faces at night, so they'd sneak around at night. One guy or two guys or maybe four guys, and sneak behind enemy lines and slit the Germans' throats. These were designed to, it's a stiletto, but it's designed to go, between the ribs pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Go straight to the heart or, the spleen, lungs, liver, whatever. That's how they got their nickname, was the Black Devils. And on the back of the bottle, there's a German saying there, and I'll probably, mess up the pronunciation, but they had these death cards that they'd have. So they'd slit the Nazis' throats and then leave these death cards, and it basically says the worst is yet to come. So the Nazis nicknamed them the Black Devils.
I love the hat tip to the 42. I mean, like
Yeah.
nobody ever
Yeah.
proofs anything at 42 proof. So coming up with that as a way to like, that's really neat. That's fun.
Yeah, and also part of the story is I got to meet some of these guys before they passed away.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know the exact number right now, but you're only talking maybe 10 guys,
Left.
8 guys left,
Yeah.
in U.S. or Canada that
I
are
mean-
still, because they're all, well over 105 or so.
According to what I saw research wise, I don't know how accurate it is, but it was roughly 1,800 volunteers for this special force, and 600 were killed.
Right.
In
battle.
in battle, and 1,000 were wounded, and before they were disbanded. So, crazy, out of 1,800, 1,200, right? Like, depending on how many of the 1,000 that got wounded that actually survived, that you actually got to meet. The ones that were still alive. I mean, that's a
Any of
very,
them?
very,
Yeah,
very low number percentage wise.
Yeah, I remember meeting, Mark Radcliffe and Joe Glass, some of those guys here, here in Montana. They were in our Montana Special Forces Association chapter, and it was pretty cool to talk to those guys and hear their stories. Joe Glass lived in Helena, but he used to have a bar called the Glass Slipper in Helena.
That's great.
little small, short guy, but I remember him telling some stories to me and some of the other younger SF guys that, about knife kills and stuff like that, and we just thought that was, pretty darn cool. And
A couple questions. One, how come? I mean, just out of curiosity, why not have it had just been a 100% American unit versus a combined with Canada?
I don't know if it had to do with the whole winter warfare aspect of it, and they figured, maybe they'll get, more guys that are already showing up with some winter warfare type skills. Maybe that was it. I don't really know the why on that, but it was cool. It was one of the first joint commando units.
Yeah.
And we still all work together today, whether it's the British SAS or, the CANSOF, Canadian Special Forces guys, or JTF2. We still work with those guys side by side, hand in hand, like today. They're out there doing it today somewhere in Africa or getting ready for whatever's coming down the pipe.
So let's also mention too that part of the labeling you have on here is kind of cool. Every batch, is it by batch? I'm assuming that honors a different soldier that was part of the brigade. And so, could you share a little bit more information about that?
We just thought it'd be interesting, on the back of, because a lot of our other bottles would have, the date and bottled by Willie or bottled by, whoever, at the distillery or, so we thought it'd be neat to each batch is in honor of one of the original forcemen. So we start batch 1, which we've already sold out of. I still have one of the, a remaining batch 1 bottle, but it was Colonel Frederick. Then I think batch 2 was Dave Woon, which was Bill Woon's father. And Bill Woon is like the go-to guy for anything Devil's Brigade history.
Wow.
He lives in Helena. And if you guys ever have a chance to go up and see the museum up there, it's pretty awesome. But Bill Woon can tell you anything about Devil's Brigade. So, and then we did Joe Glass and Mark Radcliffe, and kind of went down the list of guys that I had met or personally knew. And then, family members have been reaching out to us lately, and hey, my dad was, first Special Service Force, and so we kind of looked them up. You got to vet it. There's a list of who was and who wasn't. You got to make sure it's all legit. But we've got some other interesting ones, coming down the road.
I'm guessing
we're
that
gonna do.
in the because you guys have such a great your actual distilling room and everything there, that whether you're in Montana or out of Montana and just coming to visit is definitely worth a stop. And you have so much neat memorabilia. Do you have a section devoted for Devil's Brigade type stuff, or is it kind of
not really?
around,
There's
or?
a couple sections, but it's kind of interspersed throughout. I've kind of got a little bit of layout to my museum, as some of the guys call it, but it's most people probably won't pick up on it. But I've kind of got my Ranger and SF stuff in one area, and kind of cowboy and Western stuff, and like local legend type people, and firefighter stuff over here, and law enforcement or whatever. But it's interesting.
What do you think, Michael?
Cool. I think we need to get to the other side of the mountain more. I mean, I'm familiar with the Bighorn and the moonshine, but I might be well on my way to finding my favorite whiskey with the new stuff.
So what do you think of this?
I like it.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
And I think it's a good mix of, because it's bourbon and Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of bourbon people will appreciate it, and a lot of people who drink, Pendleton or Crown or Canadian whiskey will appreciate it too.
So because it's been mixed in America, now it's called a whiskey.
Yeah.
It's just your own special blend of whiskey.
Yep.
I
brought a coin for you too.
Oh yeah, let's talk about
But it kind of mentions where they fought at, and mostly Italy, but
yeah, that was one of the things that I saw that I took notes on.
That's neat.
As you had mentioned, that they were originally trained for the assault mission in Norway. That never happened, but they were deployed specifically to the Aleutian Islands, Italy, as you just said.
The Aleutian Islands was to fight the Japanese that had taken over some of the Aleutian Islands, and it wasn't a huge battle or huge skirmish, but the Japanese had just basically left. Maybe they caught wind or something that these dudes are coming over to
the devils are coming, get
deal
out of
some
here.
death, So, yeah, who knows? But they ended up, and they, like I said, they were specifically being trained for Norway, fighting the Germans in Norway, and it had to do something with some hydraulic dam or something like that. And that got diverted, and they ended up going to like Africa and then Italy, and then probably being misused, which a lot of commando and special forces units get misused all the time. They're good at a lot of things, and sure, they can do most everything, but if you misuse those dudes, they're going to end up getting killed or wiped out, and sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah.
Because other conventional commanders, I mean, you see that today. Some conventional commanders do not know how to employ Rangers or Green Berets or others.
So in what you were talking about, that it's the Nazis who were calling them the Black Devils. Their special forces name, did that come from all that, or at the very start were they actually called Devil's Brigade?
No, they were called the First Special Service Force.
Okay, so that became
that was all like
a moniker.
Classified information and stuff. And
that's cool.
Yeah, that's their actual name is First Special Service Force, and their nickname was the Devil's Brigade, which the Germans gave them.
Okay, dumb question of the day. What branch did they fall under?
His Army.
It was Army.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe should have been obvious, but the
mother of all branches, by the way.
That's funny. So the Devil's Brigade wasn't mass mobilization. It was selective and precision driven. So the first Special Service Force proved that small motivated teams can outperform massive bureaucratic systems. That I thought that was kind of an interesting concept, and so my question, I guess, for the table, and I'd like everybody to provide an input on this, is how do you think small disciplined operators, whether in war or in business, because all of us here are involved in business, have an advantage over massive institutions? And maybe, Willie, you could start on this, because this is something that has applied to do two different areas of your life. One on the service side, where you have mass mobilization versus the special forces concept or existence, And then, of course, with what you do with Willie's Distillery on the craft distillery side, which we talked about at pretty good length in the last show we did together with Million Acre Bourbon, the craft distillery versus corporate distillery, sort of the the distinction between the two types of businesses or business models. So, how do you think small, disciplined operators have an advantage?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few advantages, but what pops in my head first is probably just being able to adapt and being able to be nimble and being able to change quickly and read the room, so to speak, and make those timely decisions. You don't have this whole bureaucracy, and you can just make decisions and make things happen. You don't have to go and get the boards okay and everybody else's, the government's, necessarily, agreement or whatever. You can just make things happen. I think that's the first thing that kind of popped in my head. But
okay,
you just control probably too. You're able to control things better, do things your way, I guess.
So as far as correlating that to the Devil's Brigade, did they still had to answer to higher ups,
right?
But they had the ability to be a little bit more
nimble.
Yeah, I guess that's what we talked about last time.
Yeah,
the flexibility and being
they were
nimble.
probably given certain missions and broad. Hey, go over here.
Yeah,
kill these guys. Mount La Defensia was one of their more famous battles, and they're like, hey, we haven't been able to hold this hill. It's kind of the gateway into Rome. We want to take Rome, but before we do that, before we bring big army in, we need guys like you guys, because we've been bombing the crap out of this hill, and they've been using that hill as for artillery and forward observing and just being able to crush a lot of the allies that were coming in that area. It's like, we have to take over this mountain, and we don't know how to do it. And these guys were trained in mountaineering, and they scaled these cliffs in this mountain, middle of the night, and got it on with all the Germans up there, and took over the hill, and that was huge. That's what allowed U.S. forces to go into Rome. And the Devil's Brigade guys, Mark Radcliffe was the first guy to walk into Rome, like his squad, the Devil's Brigade guys. And then once they took over Rome, once big army came in, there was a little place, maybe on the outskirts of Rome or somewhere. It's called Gusville, and there's some cool photos of the Devil's Brigade guys. They made their own bar, and they call it the Gusville Saloon. So they liked whiskey and stuff, Of course they did.
Right.
What do you think, Michael?
I would agree. I like the word nimble. I haven't served in the military. I have several family members who have and are. And from what I understand, the military in general has a very one-size-fits-all mentality. I get it. If you're going to have soldiers be useful, they have to be kind of cookie cutters. But I think that's what sets units like this apart. And I think for small business owners, for parents, for farmers, I think that being nimble has a lot of benefits. I can speak from what I am experienced with on the homestead side of things. We're able to customize our operation to this area of Montana, as well as to wanting a particular product that is glyphosate free, beyond organic, because there's a lot of organic stuff that still has chemicals in it, and we're able to control the entire process because it's our farm. So I know exactly what goes into the bales of hay I feed my animals in the wintertime. I know exactly what they're grazing on in the summertime. I know exactly what's in the jar of milk that my cows produce. So I'm able to create a product that is more nimble and more customized to what I'm trying to achieve than the bigger ranches are. And same with our real product is our kids. We chose the lifestyle. We chose to raise our kids that way. And by homeschooling, I'm able to customize, and I should say my wife, who shares the biggest portion of that burden, is able to customize their education. And so far, the two adult kids that I have both become entrepreneurs themselves. And it looks like all of them are kind of headed down that path because instead of climbing the corporate ladder, there's a lot more opportunity, freedom, and the ability to make a difference in the world if you're able to blaze your own way and if you're able to build a company based on the values that you hold rather than trying to conform yourself to someone else's values.
So how do the standards that kind of applied to, because you had to be a pretty exceptional person to be able to be a part of the Devil's Brigade. How do you feel like the same standards, Michael, what you're referencing, like with what you are raising as a young family, there are specific standards that you're applying in your homeschooling and what your kids are being taught, and they're becoming that next generation, that representative generation. What's the parallel? What do you think some of the similarities are as far as just from a character standpoint, from a makeup standpoint, what separates people in those two different circumstances that makes them be able to be exceptional and do things that maybe the average person can't do?
Well, I think that taking responsibility is a huge part of that. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, in my opinion, that's lacking in our culture today is nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. And I've heard it said that the day you take responsibility is the day you become a man. I would say that to both men and women alike, I mean, if you want to make a difference in the world, start by taking responsibility for yourself, and then you can start to make a difference in your community and with others. All of my kids have learned from a very young age that what they get is what they put into it. All my kids have chores. All my kids have responsibilities. All my kids share in different aspects of the homestead. My son now works for me in my IT business. And through all of those endeavors, they're learning how to build things with their own hands, and they're learning how to work together as a team. And they're learning that when you make a mistake, you take responsibility, you own it, you fix it. And I think those values are far more important than maybe say like a test score, or far more important than being rubber stamped that you regurgitated all the information that it was decided you should be able to regurgitate to be a good citizen. I think the biggest parallel between what I'm doing with my kids and like the Devil's Brigade is all of my kids know how to think.
Critically think. I was just thinking that
know
myself.
how to process information and make decisions, and they don't have to go through a committee. They don't have to consult a textbook. And I think that's probably the single biggest factor that sets my kids apart from most of the other kids that were around is my kids may not have everything memorized, but my kids know how to find the answers they're looking for. And that's in the day and age that we live in, it's impossible to know everything, but being able to think critically is really important.
Yeah. And just rolling up your sleeves and working, getting stuff done, not blaming other people or being a victim, just getting things done, being mission focused.
Don't you think that's a big part of the reason why of all of the different trades that are listed on the back of the bottle of who was pulled from or selected from, every one of them kind of learned that,
right.
In the field, so to speak, like that, because you had to have that to be able to do what you put yourself in a position to do successfully and to survive. Karen, what do you think, hon?
Yeah, I mean, the adaptability thing to me is where it really comes down to is the people who are going to survive best in anything is the ones who can adapt to whatever in the world happens to be there. And the people who just sit there lamenting that life is changing, well, life is going to pass you by. The people who go, that's interesting. Okay, time to pivot and have the nimbleness to do it. That's huge.
Yeah.
The people, the businesses, the anything.
Yeah, it's been, yeah. We'll get into it a little bit, but it's been very interesting. We've had some really interesting recent experiences with things that I think are kind of really touch on what we're talking about today, as far as, the kind of the wheat from the chaff sort of separation. But the out of curiosity, Willie, when you put Devil's Brigade on this label for this bottle, do you feel like it was more about honoring the past, or carrying forward that standard that the Devil's Brigade represents that we were just talking about?
No, I think it's both. I mean, that's how you honor the past, is by carrying the torch, and that's what the men and women are doing today. In our service, and a lot of special units that people don't really know about, and they're carrying the torch, and that's the best way to honor any legacy, is not letting it die and moving forward and improving on it. Our men and women are so much better trained today than even my generation, and definitely the Devil's Brigade generation. I mean, those guys were hard as woodpecker lips. They were they were some
that for a second.
hard dudes, and they got things done. And there was no whining or complaining, and they were mission focused, and they had character, and they were loyal, and just worked hard, and and we still have people who do that today, but there's just so much more information and training, and it's not just all about the weapon systems, but you'd be highly surprised or impressed if you met some of our current service members that are in these specialized units. I mean, they're the cream of the crop of Earth, as far as I'm concerned, in a lot of ways.
Right.
in what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're top people.
Well, I think that's actually, I just made the connection, like with the, one of the questions that I was asking myself was, if the Devil's Brigade had never existed then, and they try to create it now, like, could you do that? And then I got to thinking, well, I would say that honestly, like Michael, like there are a lot of people out there that are, that have families that are raising their children in a way that gives them that same kind of stuff, if you will. And I think that if there was a need to bring something like this out of the ground today, I want to believe that there would be people, young people, that would be available to step forward and be able to recreate that same
100%
need.
Yeah. I agree.
Do you think a lot of that would come from the kind of the rural homeschooling type environments, or?
I think for the most part, yes.
For the same reasons?
Yeah, and I didn't grow up, in the inner city or in the city. I've, pretty much my whole life have lived, grew up on a farm and grew up in the country and live in a town of, 900 people now. And, but I've lived off and on in, some bigger places, but I don't really understand, their mentality. But I know my people, and I know our work ethic and our virtues and values, and and that's what's cool about the military. It is a big melting pot of, you've got guys sometimes from the inner city or from Cleveland or wherever, and if they pay their dues and they go through the same selection process and work just as hard as everybody else, they get the same results, and our team members and contributors, and so I think it's anybody can do that sort of stuff. It's attitude and having the discipline and the will to carry through with it.
It's that internal compass that each person happens to have, or yeah,
100%.
Do you want more of that, or do you want to switch to another one, or?
Well, I'm done first. So we
already got more.
Yes,
so.
we've already refilled.
We just put the bottle in everybody's reach.
You're behind. That's a super cool coin.
Very cool.
So the switching gears a little bit. So I did, Willie, I stumbled upon an article that you did with it was an Inc.com magazine earlier in the month of February, and it was an interesting article. I appreciated it. The title's how Montana distiller Willie Blazer plans for growth amid constant change, with written by Elizabeth Gore, February 1st, 2026, if anybody wants to look up the article. But I would recommend it. It's a cool article. I thought it was interesting. They talk about that the number of active U.S. craft distilleries, and again, we talked about this in the previous show that we did together, dropped and declined. And this is kind of interesting. So I was like, well, what at the peak, how many craft distilleries were there actually in this country? And back in between 1810 and 1840, there was anywhere between 14,000 and 20,000 craft distillers. And then it almost eliminated, it went down to like just a couple hundred, if not almost completely wiped out, like Prohibition, yeah. And now it's back up to around, it was, I think, around just shy of 4,000, but it's dropped back to about 23,000.
Or 2,000 to 3,000, or 2,300.
2,300.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes. Yeah. Good correction. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me on that. And I thought the article was really cool because it talked about that tying in with the Devil's Brigade and your history and background, and longevity in a shrinking category reflects a set of operating principles shaped by hard lessons. So the question becomes, how do you grow a small business when cost, laws, and regulations keep changing? And I guess curiosity is, from your standpoint, considering the way the volatility of your industry and the way that things have changed and everything that you've lived through and experienced and know as a man, and everything that you've done. What do you feel like is the biggest mistake that other craft distilleries make that someone that is disciplined wouldn't do?
Yeah, I guess one of the first things I would think of is listening to the consumer, listening to what your consumers, the people that are paying your bills, they're buying your stuff for a reason. Listen to what they want, adapt to them. This isn't all about you. I mean, if you're just doing it as a craft or a hobby, if you're actually doing it, to run a business and, make a livelihood for your family and employ other people, a business is a business. And, lots of times it's about money. It's about making money and staying afloat and paying your bills. And so you need to listen to what people are telling you and don't get tunnel visioned on, I have the newest, greatest idea of concocting or making this new thing. And that's cool. I mean, we've done some, different things that, maybe other people haven't done before. But, don't get focused on you. Listen to what the consumer's telling you. It's cool that you think you made the best thing in the world. Nobody's buying it,
right?
Because they don't like it.
Right.
They don't know about it, or they don't like it, or
Right.
It costs too much, or whatever the reason is.
Right.
They're not buying it. So,
But the thing that has to be hard for you too is an awful lot of the time marketing. Like, it might be amazing, but for whatever reason, it just didn't hit a message in marketing that I always find interesting. I mean, honestly, even when we do, like, when we're putting out the show, and the number of clips, because whatever, the title was just right, the thumbnail was just right, whatever it happened to be, that has a ton of watches, and something else that had just as good of information got, like, no views, and you always wonder, well, okay, but did we need to pivot on what we were saying there? Well, we were saying the same thing, but how do you, trying to separate that out in a business and going, okay, well, was it actually the product that wasn't liked, or did we just not message it the right way? Can always be.
Yeah, marketing's huge. And my late wife, Robin, she said that day one. She said, we're a marketing business who happens to make spirits.
Yeah.
You don't want to go around telling everybody that.
Right.
Here I am on a podcast, but it's, it's true. And, we're very proud of what we do and our team and our crew. I mean, we kick butt every day with what we do, but marketing goes a long ways.
Well, we were
marketing and branding and your story and all that. People want authentic people, not necessarily just corporations.
And we were talking last week about paradigm. So when somebody's stuck on what they like, if you could get them to just step outside their little box and try something new, a lot of the time they might find out that there's something totally different, and I threw myself under the bus on it. I was like, I'm a bourbon drinker. I don't think I drink rye. And then we drank the rye and I was like, this is so good.
Yeah.
Like, I love it. Yeah. And your bourbon, like, I liked it so much. And I was like, this is different than the normal bourbons I like that are normally vanilla, very vanilla forward. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's a spicy note to it. And Glenn, thankfully, was like, that's rye because it's a rye forward bourbon. And I was like, apparently I'm a rye drinker. But I was so glad that I had the opportunity because it's not something I would ever just go immediately buy. But now that I got introduced to it, now I'm like, well, I'm a rye girl. So I think that is the hard thing in any kind of business, is getting somebody to at least try the first one, try whatever it happens to be, because we all get so tunnel visioned into what we believe we are, what we believe we're supposed to do, what we believe how we're supposed to live. Any of that until you actually stop and really check in, you're going to miss out.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, Karen, because I actually wanted to just remind everybody that, so the rye whiskey is the one closest to Michael, that bottle there. And then the Million Acre Bourbon is this one here. So these are the first quarter of 2026 promotions. If anybody wants to go on Willie's website or the Treasure State Advisors website and purchase those, you can buy all three and get free shipping if you buy all three together, which is a pretty cool deal. And then you can have them to enjoy as well. Today, obviously, we're covering the Devil's Brigade, which is the March product, and the concluding the first quarter of the year. But and Michael, I know you were enjoying the Devil's Brigade, but if you get to the point where you want to branch out, you won't be disappointed.
Help yourself.
I mean,
and the rye could be very interesting in a whiskey sour. Mm-hmm. I would think that could make a tasty, spicy whiskey sour.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So the other thing, the last point about that article that I thought was cool, and this is sort of my transition over to, so Whiskey, Wealth, and Freedom show, right? So we've spent some time talking about whiskey, and we're kind of transitioning into the wealth part of the conversation. Part of the way the article concludes is Willie's approach is deliberately practical. Staying in business comes first, and growth follows only for businesses that manage cash carefully. And I thought that was very apropos from the standpoint that the question, I guess, that I want to throw out to the table. So when you think about cash position, where liquidity equals survival, and cash flow is the oxygen that actually allows that survival to occur. How, from a table's perspective, how does liquidity create optionality, and what makes liquidity powerful?
So this is liquidity, right?
That's good.
I barely got my GED.
Could you restate that one more time?
Yeah, just how does liquidity create liquidity as far as cash goes? Create optionality is the ability to be flexible, nimble, have choice, not be constrained. What makes liquidity more powerful than when it comes to, or what makes it powerful when it comes to survival from a business perspective? Could be kind of an obvious question, but. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to have some liquidity from a business perspective. And I would say, for the sake of our discussion, to be nimble, you have to be able to jump on opportunities. And if you're not able to do that, then you're going to miss the main thing that the main benefit of being small and nimble versus one of the big guys who can pound out the volume.
From my perspective, as far as the housing, real estate, how real estate is financed, that world, it's interesting to me because as I'm looking at how people handle their money, they tend to silo it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the worst thing you can do. I mean, you're never actually siloing money because money's always in flow somewhere. So unless you have stuck it under your mattress. Other than that, that's the only way it's actually taken out of flow. Just because you've locked it off from yourself doesn't mean somebody else isn't using your money to do something. And so the more we can flow money and keep control, liquidity, use, and control, right? Get a clue. That is where we can start looking at things differently. And so people tend to, especially when they're talking about financing real estate, whatever that looks like, whether it's their home or investment property or whatever, they really tend to silo that. And that's just, I did this. This was the right move at the time. I set it up. I'm done. And I never look at it again unless suddenly I get some offer and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm chasing cash flow without ever looking big picture of what it's actually doing, resetting the schedule, etc. And so to me, it's really fun to sit down with people and truly look at how they're cash flowing, truly look at how money is coming into their lives and what their needs are and what their expenses are, and come up with ways that they can use velocity and actually have their money continually work for them in different ways. So that's always fun.
Reoccurring income.
Yep.
Or whatever the other catchphrase or word for that. I forget what it's called, but that's always good.
Yep.
Yeah. So if liquidity's survival and cash flow is the oxygen that you mentioned, Karen, with the cash flow, so what happens when you understand cash flow instead of just focusing on interest rates? Because we live in such an interest rate sensitive environment, always have, probably always will. How does active cash flow management change the way someone relates to their mortgage?
That's one of the things we always say is it's so important to look at your actual, pull back the aperture, look at how everything is. Again, when we are if you own a home, if you own any kind of real estate, it falls on both sides of the balance sheet. So the balance sheet should really be looked at as three-sided. There's real estate, there's assets and liabilities, and how they all work together flows. And that liquidity of being able to everybody gets so hyper-focused anytime they're looking at any kind of financing thing on rate, but it's only one part of the equation. And they get hyper-focused on it in a way that they often hurt themselves chasing something like that. And again, then locking out money and is that the right decision? And so really being intentional, which is what we've talked about from the beginning, right? You're more likely to live in the way you want to be if you were intentional about how you were actually living, instead of just going along with your conveniences and doing whatever everybody, do this and do that and lock it all up there. And I don't know, I'm just doing what everybody told me instead of actually, and I think that's cool about the special forces. Obviously, like we said, those are the ones that have to ultimately have like self-thought and the little bit of the freedom to actually do what you know is best in the time versus just do this, do that, whatever it happens to be,
100%. There's just, not to interrupt, but that just reminded me, there's the Ranger Regiment, the Ranger Battalions, their motto is sua sponte, and that means of their own accord. So the meaning behind that is you've got a mission to do, and maybe there's 10 of us or there's 100 of us, but we have to complete this mission. And if you're the last guy, everybody's dead, guess what? Sua sponte, of your own accord, get it done. And that can translate into other things that come up. And, as Rangers, we'd kind of play around with that sometimes, or you'd do something dumb or stupid or something kind of out of place, and you'd be like, sua sponte, Sergeant. I was like, no, that doesn't apply here, dude. But it was basically, don't just do what you're told, and your gut and everything's going to tell you the right thing to do and what you're supposed to do. So get it done, whether somebody's having to tell you or force you to do it. You're the last guy, get it done.
Well, small units, big impacts.
I was just thinking the same thing.
That thing about like, ultimately you are your own decision maker. And if you quit, the number of people who've abdicated that and just given it up to whatever it happens to be, their employer's person just telling them to do this or all of these different things, quit abdicating your own freedom to choose how you want to live. And ultimately you're going to be better off if you are the person who actually says, no, I want to be the one who makes my own decisions about my thing. And ultimately that's what gives you the nimbleness to be able to overcome things and adapt because you aren't just following the lemmings off the ledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be a follower of the herd. When everybody else is retreating, you're the guy going in. To take it back to the Devil's Brigade, they went places where nobody else would go. I think that really to be countercultural, to go against the flow, you have to be willing to think bigger. And I think that this brigade understood, and all the modern special forces understand, that it's bigger than them. It's something that's much bigger than an individual. And I would say that nothing great can be accomplished in one lifetime. I would say when you're talking wealth and influence, it takes a multi-generational vision. Our founding fathers didn't just appear one day out of the blue.
All right.
There were a lot of things that went into the men that were raised to become the founders of this country. And if we want to have a difference, I think we need to think multi-generational. We need to think about how our influence affects more than just us, and how our decisions, whether it's cash flow or whatever, how that trickles out. I mean, you can look at examples throughout history, the Addams family being one, on how one family was able to massively influence politically and economically the future of a nation.
You're talking about John Adams.
Yep.
John Quincy Adams.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Not the Adams family.
That's
Like the legit, the OG Adams
Right.
family.
Right. That's
Samuel Adams, all those guys. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they
You know what's
Who
sad?
was a
though?
great brewer?
Hold on. But you know what's sad is you actually do have to specify that, right? Because there's a lot of
People
people
start
that might be
picturing
watching this
Morticia.
and they're thinking of the Adams Family, like the show,
Start
like,
singing
the
right,
song.
whatever this. So, and I'm sorry, Michael, I just interrupted you. But
No,
'cause you were
it's valid.
Yeah, it was good. You were.
Some families have a disproportional influence on culture and history, and I
Yep.
think it's because of the way their mindset is, the way they think about money, about family, about culture, about everything. Benjamin Franklin is another one. I mean, obviously, the financial side is not my area of expertise, but I love history. And I was just reading the other day that one of the trusts that he set up in his will lasted over 100 years and influenced. It started the Franklin Institute of Technology. It bought a waterworks system for, I believe, Boston or Philadelphia. But those two were both beneficiaries in this trust. But also throughout that trust, he helped hundreds of young tradesmen be able to establish a trade. So for a relatively small investment for the time, he had a huge impact by understanding how money works and by understanding cash flow. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, one of the first places to me that people can take agency is knowledge. I mean, my gosh, in this day and age, it's so easy. Look, I love movies. I do love TV and certain shows and stuff like that. But ultimately, I love to learn. And so any time that you have a chance where you can, and that's why I ended up in the industry, as I would sit there and be like, there needs to be a better way to have conversations with people, because again, they're financing what is going to be their largest asset with their largest liability for a while. But they have to understand. I want them to understand how all this works together, which is why I joined National Institute of Financial Education, and stay committed to that enough that I am on a call with our mastermind group at least once a week, and I'm always trying to put out content to help people actually understand, because the amount of financial literacy in this country, as far as just for most people, is really quite pathetic.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, how can you ever possibly do better, right? I did the best I could until I knew better, and now I do better.
And what the worst is having knowledge and not applying it.
Yeah.
Right, because
okay.
knowledge is only potential power.
Right.
It's,
Right.
it's not until you
You've got
put
to
it into
execute.
action.
You've got to act on what
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I asked you guys the question a little bit ago about, do you think, if the Devil's Brigade never existed previously and we had to recreate it or start it today, could we, based on what we have to work with from a population standpoint? And I asked that for a very kind of stated purpose or reason, and that's because it's very difficult or frustrating for us when we, with the world that we live in, and we see people get so easily tempted by the rocket mortgages of the world and things where all of a sudden, like, it's just, there is it seems to be very, and it goes back to the whole icebreaker question, safety versus convenience. When people start to abdicate personal responsibility just for the sake of things becoming more convenient or easier, or there is not really a desire to want to take ownership over your own situation, but you want to let somebody else basically kind of save the day for you rather than doing it yourself. Like, that's to me why conversationally I tried to make a concerted effort to pull all this together, because I feel like that, Willie, what you're talking about with sort of what went into the ability for Devil's Brigade to even exist in the first place and have any kind of success as a small unit with big impact. Asymmetrical advantage and asymmetrical impact required a very minority select group of people that that operated with elite high standards that isn't normal. And we see this on a regular basis in the world that we live in. And I know that's why I made a point of bringing up in that article about with the craft distillery industry, because the craft distillers that are able to navigate the environment of today are the ones that are applying the discipline, the critical thinking, the same kind of fortitude and the same kind of character and grit that you can apply in a lot of different arenas. So trying to pull everything together in a coherent thought process can be a little challenging or disjointed if not done well. But that's the whole reason why I wanted to go the direction I went in with this conversation, was to help try to connect those dots, because I think it's important. And so, Karen, a question for you is, so how would you say, based on what we've talked about so far, what does financial small unit warfare look like in today's world?
Well, to me, I mean, the most strategically, the most nimble product is, we have a proprietary product at CMG Loans that is called the all-in-one loan. And it allows you to have the nimbleness of equity, being able to access your equity as easily as you could with any checking account. And also, again, the freedom to be able to handle it as you want. So you aren't having to go, once you have that in place, now you can draw on it for the opportunities that are there and pay it back, pay as little interest as you want or as much as interest as you want, depending on how you choose to handle that product and the setup of it. And again, looking at your entire life. And so when you talk about something that is really unique, and people are always like, well, why haven't I heard of it? Well, because if you ever looked at how much money banks make off of a traditionally amortizing 30-year mortgage, they don't want you to get into this.
No,
like,
100%.
That's the worst thing in the world. It's a principal paid first mortgage. But thank God it does exist. And for the right person who can qualify for it and does cash flow in a way that it makes sense, it is a game changer, because it lets them keep control of their equity and use of their money in a way that velocity banking, they can now really, I mean, it just becomes it becomes such a tool in their arsenal to really be able to have an impact and do things they never imagined that they could have ended up being able to finance or whatever before. Because, a borrower has to borrow. An investor very often chooses to borrow because ultimately it makes sense to use that leverage.
Yeah, Willie, if you recall from the last show you were in, when Kyle was here, Kyle Reese from Helena, yeah. Has he talked to you at all about the infinite banking concept? Are you familiar with that?
I'm somewhat familiar, yes.
Yeah. So Kyle was down last time and was explaining kind of what that is and how that can help people. And
I was listening to your show.
Okay. Well, that's the whole point of the liquidity and cash flow management, right? It's like understanding how that's, in my mind, how financial small unit warfare looks in today's world, because we live in these systems, these financial systems that tells us that do these things, right? Check these boxes. Don't, don't question it. Don't pay attention. Just if you check the boxes, you'll be fine.
Give us our money. We'll manage it.
Yeah, give us your money.
Maybe we'll give you a return.
Yeah.
In a family of nonconformists, that's a question that has come up several times as my kids are approaching adulthood, or some of them are starting families now. It's okay, where it's drilled into us. You need to buy a home, and you need to spend your whole life paying that home off to the bank. A lot of people, it's also drilled in. You got to have a huge student loan for a degree that may or may not benefit you in today's economy. And so my kids are asking all the right questions. They're like, okay, if I'm $100,000 into student debt, what does that actually give me? Show me some math on if that decision makes sense. And same with the home. It's like, yeah, the American dream is to own your own home, but how much does the bank actually make off that home? And is this in my best interest? Because, somehow it seems like the banks always win.
Well, that's where I get so frustrated, with the whole mindset of just give us your money and we'll manage it. And you just sit there and be happy. And someday when you retire, we'll tell you how much you actually have. Yep. To me, that's a little bit of the same world of like, right now, how things are running, rates dropped. Awesome. That's great. But at the same time, like everybody and their brother is coming out to tell you, of course, you should refinance. And the kicker is what they're going to get you with is cash flow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can save $150 a month. And nobody ever bothers to look at the bottom line that part of that savings is because you've redone your amortization schedule. So you've just taken your debt and extended out over a new 30-year term. So that's part of the savings. And then the other thing is you've taken the cost and thrown it into are you even bothering to look? All you're looking at is, but I'm going to save that money. And, again, agency, look at all your numbers. Mm-hmm. Don't just look at the bottom line. Don't just, cash flow is important. We all live lives of cash and cash flow. And I get it. If you were so strapped for cash that $150 is going to actually save you. And if you are going to do that savings, well, let's look at what it does to actually pay things off even faster and get you a lower effective percentage rate. Because the bank's percentage rate is if you paid it by the term. If you are paying extra, your effective percentage rate ends up lower. So, make sure you're actually doing your own math. Don't just sit there and go, well, I don't know. He said I'm going to save this, and so it doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't cost me anything. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. Amen. Ask the right questions.
Right.
Well, and the reason why I asked you about if you knew, Kyle, obviously, and the infinite banking concept is because one of the biggest challenges for people that are interested in pursuing that is, again, going back to the whole liquidity cash flows, situation is how do I, when I look at my current standard of living, and this is what my current cash flows are, I make this much, I spend this much, I don't have that extra income to capitalize a policy in order to use for access to capital on an as needed basis. And so question becomes, well, how do I do this? And that's where it becomes interesting when you start really thinking outside of the box and you realize when you understand the system you live in and you go, okay, just because they're saying that we should get this 30-year mortgage, we should lock up all of this equity in this house, it becomes an illiquid cash position, and it doesn't do us, it doesn't serve us today. We can carry it forward as part of that three-sided balance sheet that Karen's talking about, but the question becomes, how do you free that equity up and deploy it into a position of really actually being able to be utilized now, and that's
make you wealthier.
And I mean, it can accomplish all kinds of things. It can really boost, or it can become sort of that small unit, big impact type decision that can make all the difference in the world for the right person, right. And that's key, right? Like, all of this that we're talking about goes back to you have to be the right person in order for the strategy or these tools to work. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's why, like a Devil's Brigade has such high standards, because you're not going to just take any Tom, Dick, or Harry on your brigade or as part of your brigade. It better be the right person, because if it's not the right person, they're going to cost you dearly.
It's always, it's quality over quantity.
Yeah.
That's what special operations,
right,
lives and breathes. And that's 100%. I would rather have 2 guys who were just awesome and I could trust versus 50 guys, who are just lazy or whatever. But it's all about, the quality.
And
that's the thing we've talked about. Who wants to join our wagon train? Because it's not going to be everybody. Like, people are going to be like, "Wait, you want me to actually take responsibility?" No, I'm not coming on your wagon train.
Well, and part of what I promised is that a couple things here. So pork is a lot of times that I have to talk Karen off the ledge because she'll have to address a situation where she just can't she can't feel comfortable with what is happening conversationally with certain people because they get tempted and very easily, and then they lose sight of the big picture, the long-term thinking, their
I've come to the conclusion, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him think.
Yeah.
You can lead a human to knowledge, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right,
you can lead a human to knowledge, but you cannot make him think.
Yeah.
Like, it does not matter how much you lay it out. They're
So I always say to her,
Yeah.
honey, like the way I try to placate her and make her feel better is, okay, stop and think about it. Like, is that somebody that you would really want to invite along
On your wagon train.
as part of your wagon train? Like,
Let him go.
Be selective.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Be selective. Have the
Yeah.
high standard. And but this kind of tying this all back into that opening claim. Freedom has never belonged to the majority. Small discipline operators outperform large systems. That's why I started the show that way, because it all kind of ties together and become sort of a common denominator. But talking about the pioneer thing, so Willie, as you know, because you've been on the show a couple times before, and but Michael, we talk about with the New Frontier Financial Advocacy with through the Treasure State Advisors. What we do is we try to parallel sort of a new frontier against the old frontier, and we try to really carry forward the same kind of principles and key traits that were relevant then for necessity and opportunity and independence are still relevant today. It's just now that opportunity doesn't exist in free land or available land if you can survive and claim it. It's within the own systems that we live in. And so the cool thing about pioneers then is they did not wait for permission, right? They either determined, I'm going to I have the resilience, the self-reliance, the grit, the vision. I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm joining that wagon train, and I'm gone, and I'm going to go make it happen. And it's interesting to me that in today's day and age, like, we have set ourselves up where so many of us wait for permission with our money. It's like like Karen was saying, we silo our money into all these different places, and then we
get told you can't touch that.
Yeah, we wait for permission.
Don't touch your 401k
Right.
or this IRA until this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of, from a freedom implication standpoint, it's kind of an interesting, it ties into that whole, again, trying to tie everything back into the whiskey, wealth, and freedom concept. But curious, you guys, you had mentioned, Willie, from an example standpoint, 401k, and when you think about the way that we operate today from a permission standpoint, are there other places where we do the same thing, where we ask for permission as far as being able to access our money or money in general?
Yeah, I know we do, just because there's so many. If I just want to go down the laws and regulation route, just more and more keep getting passed. Okay, you people need to do this way, or all these things keep getting keep getting passed or whatever. And a good friend of mine told me, he's like, man, I wished, up at Helena or Washington D.C., every time they pass a new law or regulation, they should have to take 2 away. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because you're just, at some point, we're all going to be so regulated, like, you can't do anything,
Right.
unless you're told to do it, or you get my point. Like, it's so.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to be that pioneer in a lot of ways, because there's just so many rules and regulations.
Well, there's so many at this point. I always wonder, at any
Yeah.
given moment, I'm probably breaking some rule, even though I don't mean to, but I don't even know it exists. But Like,
Yeah, I mean, like we're free. You know, America's free,
Right. Yeah,
but
yeah.
we ain't.
yep.
You know, we all know it.
Well, I
We
mean,
don't all know it, but
I mean, there were trappers in the Rocky Mountains before the Louisiana Purchase. I
Right.
mean, they didn't wait for the green light that it's okay, we bought it, you can go in.
Yeah.
They went in anyway, knowing that they could possibly and probably be killed. But they knew there were opportunities, and they were not about to wait for permission. You know, I think at least our family culture is very much nonconformist, to the point where it's actually a problem at times. But I would love to learn more on the financial side of things, how to eliminate the banker or minimize the influence that the banks have on my family, because as an owner of several small businesses, cash flow is extremely important, and we rob Peter to pay Paul all the time. And my investment strategy up to this point has been pretty simple. I can make enough mistakes on my own. I don't trust others. So I usually reinvest in myself as much as possible, but it would be nice to have more tools in the toolbox and know what I was doing in that realm, because there are times when you do need more cash flow. And I think that the world has given us marching orders. They've given us a conformist mindset that this is the way it's done, and if you do it this way, you'll be happy. And some of us just don't hear that music.
Well, and it's access to information too, right? Like, because like talking about being highly trained is like, you know, like part of the Devil's Brigade is, you know, there was an intentional effort put into the, you know, what was required to prepare these people for success as part of the brigade. And I think the problem is that what we're trying to do anyway is we're trying to kind of help open people's options up and realize and share information that's not widely known or circulated. And so going back to the whole permission thing, it's like, well, you're trained to have home wealth and home ownership this way, and nobody ever questions it. But because that's just because they don't know any better. But once you realize, well, wait a minute, if I'm interested in something like an infinite banking concept, but cash flow is an issue because I do live, I have a budget, and I just don't see the extra ability to fund a contract or a policy. So isn't it pretty cool that, again, for the right people, you can tap into that locked up equity in your house and say, well, we can apply that ability to use that, to access that equity and fund that contract that we didn't even realize was an option before. So now it becomes on the table. So it makes you, it kind of makes you more lethal, so to speak, like in a financial operational standpoint.
The thing that I find so fun, people come and they ask questions as if there's an answer to them. Like, should I get a 30 or a 15 year? Well, that depends. I need to see your entire financial picture, what makes sense for you, blah, 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 blah. All of those things, a 15 year is going to save me money. Well, only if you look at the mortgage as its own siloed thing. If you could, if you have a mortgage for 5%, but you have something that you can invest in that makes 7%, well, you're better off investing, getting a loan for 30 years at 5% and being able to free up that cash flow that you can invest at 7%. So all of that, like, again, nothing should live in a silo. You always have to pull back and see how every facet of your financial life is influencing each other, because the answer to everything is always individual. And it's always how that person is set up, what life looks like for them, to an extent, what their stomach is for risk or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of that. So, I hate anytime there's certain questions that I just go, what's your rate? What do you want it to be? Because I can show you how to get a 3% rate right now if you want it, just by how you pay back that loan. Like, why, you're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
So when you can actually, again, I say it all the time, but take agency and decide to be responsible for how you're setting up your life and first of all, what are your goals? And then how do we get you there? It's always really, really, really fun to actually be able to look at all the options.
Sounds like you're not into cookie cutter approaches.
God, no.
Yeah, that's cool.
So Willie, is there anything else about the Devil's Brigade that has come to your mind that you'd like to share with us?
I can think about it. I mean, I can talk all day about our whiskey and Devil's Brigade story, and it's a lot of interesting things. We're trying to get into Canada. I know it's kind of a tricky time right now, but Canada's always been real tough to get into as far as alcohol, whiskey, and that's part of the reason why we haven't done it over the years. But I got a good friend, Dallas Alexander. You can look him up on the social media and everything. He's a musician. He was born in Alberta, but he was a JTF-2 sniper, which is a Canadian Special Forces unit. But he's the current guy. Him and his team have the current world record of the longest sniper kill, which is in Mosul, Iraq, and it was 2.2 miles. So that's kind of cool. Wow. But he's a Devil's Brigade guy.
It's almost hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah, and that's the type of people that the Devil's Brigade legacy is creating now, and the people that are carrying on their legacy is guys like him. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, and he gave me a rug they were in the Nineveh Hotel, like a bombed out hotel in Mosul, Iraq, and this was in 2017, not that long ago. But we still got guys doing things,
right?
A lot of places. They were mostly fighting ISIS then, still are in some ways. But anyway, they were in the Nineveh Hotel, but he gave me one of the rugs that was in the room from their OP, their sniper position. I got that hanging at the distillery. So that's pretty cool.
At the distillery? Is it in the tasting room?
Yeah.
I have to make sure I go look at that.
But he's from Alberta, and he's got some pull up there, and he's got quite a following, on social media, musician, and he's trying to help us get into Alberta, because Alberta's separate than the rest of Canada as far as their liquor control boards. You don't have to get into like Quebec or Ontario or whatever.
So here's an off-topic conversation, but I'm curious. Canadian whiskey, to technically be called Canadian whiskey, it has to be done in Canada.
Yeah, and that's why we source 40% of this bottle is from a distillery,
so that it can
Alberta.
be Canadian whiskey. But
right.
How does Pendleton's based out of Oregon? How do they?
Right, it doesn't mean it's made in Oregon.
No, it's just bottled there, right? It gets trucked down and then bottled in Pendleton.
So they aren't a distillery; they're just a bottler.
Yeah, and I don't want to misspeak. They were part of Hood River Distillers, and I don't know where they're at right now. But yeah, Pendleton.
I mean, it's
whiskey's made in Canada.
It is, so it is. They can call it Canadian
there's
whiskey
different things that they
there.
do, and I don't want to misspeak about
right.
that.
But it is actually okay.
Yeah.
So I was
all
like,
Canadian
well, how is that
whiskeys
called?
have to be
right
made in Canada. Now it's our water, which is a big deal. It's if it's something is 40% alcohol, the other 60% is water. So that's our Ennis water.
So you get their
and then
pure
we can age it in barrels a little bit, do our own little take on it. But the raw juice, the raw whiskey has to be made in Canada.
Same with if you wanted to make a Scotch, you would have to call it a Scotch style whiskey or something.
And what you're seeing in the U.S., if you go to any liquor store, if you see American single malt whiskey, that is Scotch. That's a Scotch.
Huh.
And that's basically, barley, and it's distilled and aged, and not everybody's doing, using peat moss and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's a lot of very good single malt whiskeys, American single malt whiskeys that I'd be willing to bet would rival, some of the best Scotches. They're all getting mad right now if they're listening to this, but it's true. Well, it's just like California,
right?
What is it? Sparkling wine or what's? Champagne.
But they get
Yeah, I mean they're making some of this stuff just as good or better than champagne, but they can't call it champagne.
Right.
Same with tequila. There's a lot of different laws and rules that got trademarked over the years. Different countries. Vodka never got trademarked. Anybody can make vodka, kind of however you want to make it. But.
So, Michael, I noticed that you tried some of the rye whiskey. Thoughts?
I think it's going to be awesome.
And make a delicious whiskey sour.
I think in a whiskey sour, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm excited to try it in a mixer.
It's the spice note that would be really good in a sour, for sure.
Yep.
This is not a fair question, Willie. So feel free to
Refuse to
refuse to answer. of all of your products, if you can only pick one.
Yeah, I get asked that quite a bit. I got asked that yesterday, actually. For taste or for like cool factor or for...
I'm curious taste.
I think cool factor, the Devil's Brigade, is probably hard to beat.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of me and my buddies drink the Devil's Brigade, and that's also what I was talking about Dallas Alexander, you know, him being who he is in Canada, a musician, and, you know, current world records, you know, longest shot holder right now.
2.2 miles.
Yeah, that's a 10-second shot. The bullet's in there for 10 seconds. So think about that.
It's insane.
That is insane.
Yeah.
I honestly can't wrap
They
my
have
brain
to,
around that.
and I'm going down a little rabbit hole, but I mean, it's not just humidity and elevation and wind and temperature and mirages. I mean, you're having to take into effect the Coriolis effect, which is the Earth rotating. So your dope and your numbers, you know, you guys are all numbers people. I mean, some of the math they're doing to make a 2.2 mile shot with the 50 cals, pretty legit, you know. And you guys can look it up on YouTube. The whole thing's on video. I mean, it's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But where was I going with that?
Yeah. No, he asked you. Did he ask? Was he the one that asked you that same question I just asked you?
No.
The only.
But I was just saying, a lot of people in Canada, a lot of Canadians and his following and former Canadian military guys, they really, really want our Devil's Brigade, and it's so
story,
hard
right.
to get it to them.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll drive down here, they'll drive down to Montana or whatever just to, you know,
Pick
try
it
to
up.
get some bottles, but then they can't necessarily take it across the border, so it's kind of tricky.
I still go back to
But-
the very first show we did with you. Not with you, with the very first show we did with Dave, one of your sales guys. He was. And I always bring this up because I have to kind of throw myself under the bus. He made the comment about, you know, how important the stories are, and at the time I didn't really appreciate that, but talking about Devil's Brigade today and how cool of a story it is, and just really, like you said, like the cool factor, like there's something so unique about this product that is really, it is all about the story, and so I think that is
Still gotta taste good.
it does have to taste good.
It's still, you know, sometimes the price point. You know, I'm lucky that I don't have to buy any of this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
So the price point is a factor for me, but I like all of our whiskey. I like everything we make. I can appreciate it, you know, but I love our Bighorn bourbon. That's probably my go-to in a lot of instances, but just because I know the Devil's Brigade and it's a little bit more scarce, so I try not to drink it all the time, you know, because it's like, hey, maybe we could sell this stuff.
Save those
And
bottles.
10% of the proceeds goes to our Montana Special Forces Association. Just like this shirt
nice.
I'm
Right.
wearing, like everything
Right.
we do, Devil's Brigade, our Montana Special Forces Association is getting, and that was one of my, it wasn't a deal, but that's just what I told those guys, you know, gave them my word. It was like, hey, anything I do with this, you know, some of the proceeds are going to go back to you guys, because they do some awesome things with the current military families and scholarships for kids, and they do some pretty cool things.
Right. So keep in mind, merch, you can buy all that online easily.
Yep. And that
Yep.
bottle goes to a
Anywhere
good
you are.
cause.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is important for people to know. But because of how cool the story is behind this, is this one of your, like, is this something that you feel like that people gravitate to because they're so intrigued by
They do.
what went
yeah.
into the build out of it?
Yeah, and sometimes maybe it's just a name. You know, people that don't have a clue, which is probably 95% of Americans that have no idea about the Devil's Brigade. But
Yeah.
maybe the word devil, and, you know, maybe it's a kind of a catchy, neat name, and there's a devil in the back, you know, wearing what's this, you know, USA Canada thing going on. It's kind of interesting, but
Yeah.
it's cool to keep the story alive. And
Well, for
talk
myself,
about it.
that's actually the very first Willie's product I was introduced to years ago. A friend gave us a bottle of that as a gift. And I was like, this is so fascinating. And, we enjoyed drinking it. And then I, of course, read the bottle because that's what I do. And I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then started researching it and getting into it. And
A lot of Montanans don't. I mean,
Yeah.
the older generation does.
Yeah.
Every, what they call the greatest generation, or
Right.
you get it. But a couple generations older than us, or maybe even one. I mean, a lot of those people grew up on Devil's Brigade and Montana being a part of that history.
yeah.
And it's cool because a lot of those guys, a lot of those Canadians or whatever that trained in Helena, when they came back from the war, the ones who lived, guess where they went? They went to Helena, and they married local gals, and they raised their family and kids here. So it's pretty amazing, like how many, nieces and nephews and siblings, grandkids that, I run into are like, hey, my great grandpa he was a Devil's Brigade guy or a Forceman, and sometimes they'll show me like their V42 and
That's neat.
that their grandpa gave them. One of my good smoke jumper buddies, he was telling me that, this is like in 99. I was on Sawtooth Hot Shots, and he was like, I wasn't even a special forces guy by then. I'd been in Ranger Battalion, but he was like, yeah, my grandpa was a Devil's Brigade guy, Forceman, and he showed me the V42, and I was like, holy crap, man. Like, that is legit. Like, that's pretty cool.
So the V42s that you have, because you have two of them sitting here, were they?
These are all replicas. Now I have the one I didn't bring because I didn't bring here is in a glass case at the distillery, and I have it locked up because unfortunately there's thieves in the world. And I couldn't find the key. I was asking my general manager, my wife, Katie. I was like, hey, do you guys, I got to get over here, and you guys know where the key is? I don't have to break this glass, And Matt's like, don't you have a couple other V42s, in your office or your desk? And I was like, oh, yeah, thanks, So that's cool. So this V42 was given to me by my SF team when I left. 0304, W. Blazer, 19th SF Group, SF ODA 932. That was back when we only had three numbers on teams. Now they have 4. And then this one, the one up there, I saw that, but this guy, Ralph Lee, just passed away like 3 days ago. Great American, awesome, legendary. I won't go down this rabbit hole, but he's just a great American. And he gave me his V42 knife that 5th and 7th Group had given him when he retired. But Colonel Ralph Lee, but he's a legend. Born in Peru, awesome story.
Wow.
I could talk about that someday, but great dude.
It's you're
Legendary
welcome
guy.
to share anything about him that you'd like. I can tell that it's
Yeah, I
important
might
to
get a little
you.
teary-eyed. So
Yeah, it's okay.
why not?
Maybe
But,
later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good guy.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for bringing it. Very much.
Yeah, they're very neat.
Yeah, it's very cool. So as far as so all the things that people can access. So the tin tacker behind you, the T-shirt you have on.
I'm sure hoodies and whatever else.
You've got these stickers.
Yeah, they're
that
all
that-
online.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't come to the distillery. And
Yeah, right on.
What other resources, especially for the younger generation, to immerse in the story and connect with some of these guys? You talked about the guys from the Devil's Brigade that you got to talk to. What would you recommend to young people today that want to learn from those that have gone before them?
Well, I mean, you can, obviously read online or history books or stuff like that, but maybe talk to some of the older generation guys. Everybody's got a story, and that's what's cool. We all have stories. We all have, sometimes we might not think they're cool, or people don't want to hear it, but everybody's got a story. You've got some cool stuff that you've done and you've been through and you're working on, So
When you said there's a museum in Helena, to that.
yeah, there's a Devil's Brigade or the Montana Military Museum, but they have a lot of Devil's Brigade stuff. That's a cool place to go learn about the Devil's Brigade. But yeah, just talk to, most SF, I say SF, but Special Forces guys know their history and their lineage.
Well, there are a couple websites on here, Michael, that probably are worth sharing. There's the sfa28.org website, and then there's the devilsbrigadewhiskey.com. Does that just go?
Yeah, and that's not a lot of people go to that website, but it ties back into our main Willie's Distillery webpage, and then you can read more, about the Devil's Brigade. But there's some pretty cool stuff out there, and there's probably 20 books on the Devil's Brigade. And
Nice.
I remember some of the older guys, before they passed away, but they're like, "Don't read that book. It's stupid. It's kind of half truth, half lies, and that never happened that way." But off the top of my head, but there was 2 books that they all agreed on. They're like, "Hey, if you want to know what we did, read this book or read that one." And they're going to be something Devil's Brigade or the Forcemen or something like that. I'll have to get back with you guys on exactly, which author and which book, but
Yeah, I'd
there's
love
some
to
good.
know.
Are those resources? Do you know offhand? Are they mentioned or listed on the sfa28.org website?
Maybe not. The best place is the First Special Service Force Association website.
Okay.
And that's actually ran in Canada. And Bill Woon, who lives in Helena, he used to be the president of that organization. He's not anymore. But yeah, go to the First Special Service Force Association. They have tons. They have the photos. They have what they call the Burnham's List roster. They have their roster of everybody on it. And sometimes there's a little bit of misspellings. You can imagine this is 1942 and some typewriters. So sometimes they spelt the guy's last name wrong or the first name, or like maybe he was from Omaha, Nebraska, and they put Omaha, IA, and you're like trying to figure out Omaha. There's no Omaha, Iowa, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you gotta, if I'm going to put a name on the back of the bottle, it's got to be a legit Forceman.
Sure.
It can't just be, well, my grandpa was he was a Devil's Brigade guy. I was like, okay, let's find out.
The Quentin Tarantino movie Inglourious Bastards, is that loosely actually based off of
loosely.
where they leave the card and everything?
Yeah, that's based loosely off the Devil's Brigade.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Well,
their hair wasn't quite as cool as Brad Pitt. But, they tried. They didn't have Navy SEAL hair, but they tried. They didn't care about their hair. They cared about doing their job.
was that a dig at the Navy SEAls?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They keep the hair gel companies in business, man. It's crazy. I got a lot of buddies that are SEALs, but right behind the bar, I got a sign that says Navy SEALs free drinks tomorrow. I've only had one guy show up like the next day. It was like, hey, where's my free drink? It's like, dude, it says tomorrow.
Yeah.
So don't hold this against me, but my brother's Air Force.
Chair
so,
Force.
Well, he
Did you call him
allowed.
chair force?
Chair Force, yeah.
It made me think when you were talking about Army as like the force, right? Like really, and I was thinking about that, and when we were talking before about like freedom and safety and cushion and Air Force is all about, well, we'll protect your freedoms, but come on. I have to have a 5-star hotel. And he would laugh that they would go to different places. And his claim was that obviously they were all smarter because who doesn't want to stay in the 5-star hotel? But like all the way down to the poor Marines who are sleeping in the mud and being like, wait, you got a tent?
Well, that's the only thing I told my daughters. They both go to MSU now, but I was like, hey, if y'all are ever thinking of going into the military, one, let me know. I might know a few things. Don't just join up. And two, I'm probably going to lean you, guide you into, the Air Force, or maybe the Coast Guard, just 'cause I know things, But no, I like all of my veteran buddies and all the services, but that's just what we do. And Marines have been notorious for, eating crayons. And so we used to have crayons at the distillery because sometimes kids will come in, with their families and they'll grab a crayon, and we kept I kept having to go back and buy more crayons. I was like, where's all the crayons going? I was like, man, the Marines are coming in, they're eating them. So I got a crayon box behind the bar also that says 1 crayon per Marine per day. You know, because they'll eat all the crayons. But that's a running joke, you know. And they all know it. And there's only been a few times where somebody got legit, you know, kind of mad, or sometimes it's like an older Marine, you know. But if you're under 60, you know, and you're former, or that's another thing they say is, I'm not a former Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. You know, they have a lot of interesting things. I love the Marine Corps and their guys, but it's the same thing they would do if they had a distillery or bar. They'd be making fun of Army guys all day long.
Sure.
Yeah. It's a funny rabbit hole for another day, but honestly, how in the world did it get? I mean, it's all taxpayer dollars that are funding the different. So how did the Air Force get such a primo?
Well, they're all, you know, they're 250 years old right now, the Army and the Marine Corps.
Right.
The Army's just a tad older than the Marine Corps. But yeah, the Air Force wasn't formed until after World War II. It used to be the Army Air Corps.
Right. Yeah.
And then it wasn't until like maybe 1950, don't quote me on that the Air Force was actually formed. And then, you know, Trump just formed Space Force, you know, 6 years ago or whatever, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. But
Yeah.
They're going to stay at really nice places on Mars.
yeah.
I don't know. Well, all right. Well, let's wrap it up. We're knocking on the 2-hour mark. So thank you guys for coming in. Thank you very much, Willie.
Thank you,
Michael. Appreciate you coming in and joining us today and contributing. And thank you, Karen, as always. And thank you for bringing in your wonderful products and giving us the opportunity to enjoy them. To be fair, if somebody asked me the question today, what's your favorite Willie's product? I honestly couldn't answer. I really couldn't. I mean that sincerely. I just really enjoy them all. Like
the flavors of all the different ones. I mean, everything from.
Yeah, and they're different, and I can appreciate any of them. But it's sometimes it depends on what mood I'm in or what I'm wanting to do with it, you know. But,
well, you're doing a great job. And,
thank you.
And it's
not me. I got a great team.
You do, and
great team.
You really do. I've met a lot of them, and they're good people, and you're doing it all right. And we obviously wish you all the best, and hopefully, what we're doing together on the show, it's still early in the process, but I really, really, hope that long term that you can see some growth through our efforts, because we believe in you, and we believe in what you've done and what you're doing. And,
same here.
And we really want to help grow your brand, because it's important to us, not just from a product standpoint, but from what you stand for philosophically. So
yeah, same here.
Thank you,
I like
Willie.
what you guys do and what you stand for, and it's needed, very, very much needed.
Yeah, it's just, still trying to figure out how to combine the whiskey and wealth conversation together is still a little tricky for me, but we'll get there. Yeah. You just drink more, right? And then it starts to make more sense.
Liquid gold.
Is there anything whiskey doesn't go with?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think so.
Vehicles.
That's true.
There's quite a few. There's quite a big list.
Okay.
Heavy equipment.
Yeah.
See?
But no, I get it as far as
Well, I do like liquidity.
Yeah,
I like this liquidity.
Yeah, liquidity.
That's a good
And that's, some people
never gonna think about liquidity the same way.
Right.
we had, just maybe for my background and for a few other things, my buddies, but we've had different, maybe gun manufacturing people like Nemo Arms up in Kalispell back in the day, but they were taking our bottles down to SHOT Show, or they'd take cool photos with their long guns and our bottles, and you know how social media is, Facebook and the Book of Faces, as I call it, and Instagram, and people are like, guns and whiskey don't mix. Some people did, and I get that. A lot of it was, people from California or New York or whatever commenting, about anything we're doing. But So actually, like, look up the laws. Is it against the law to shoot guns, in your backyard or wherever up in the mountains, while drinking whiskey? Is there a law against that? And there isn't. I mean, it's highly frowned upon. Yes, you should not operate a handgun or any gun while intoxicated. It's just a common sense thing, but there's actually no laws about that.
Yeah, I don't know. The horse world's a little different. I mean, the whole fox hunting crowd, they all always have a flask and start the day with a stirrup cup before they go out on their chargers over crazy jumps. But, a little liquid courage helps them out, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael, anything you want to add in closing?
It's been a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Yeah, appreciate it very much. And I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and shut her down.
Now I gotta run back to Montana. I had my fun.